By Catherine Herridge from the Fox News Channel. Catherine, good afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
You're talking about General Flynn's, I guess, resignation or firing, depending on how you want to look at it today.
Right. Well, we're learning more today about the scope of the FBI investigation and more about the timing and what led up to Flynn's resignation. So we were able to confirm some elements that were first reported by the New York Times and other parts of the story, which do suggest that the print reporting may have been somewhat overblown in this case. So with Flynn, we confirmed that he was interviewed by the FBI just days into taking the job as National Security Advisor, and after the White House had publicly denied that he'd ever talked about sanctions with the Russians, because the FBI sort of knew differently from these transcripts of the phone calls. Nothing that we've learned in our reporting suggests that Flynn broke the law in the conversation with the Russian ambassador, that he promised to give it a review when they got in, but he did not promise to make a policy change. And we don't believe, based on our reporting, that Flynn got caught in what I call a Martha Stewart situation, which is lying to the feds, which is a USC 1001, and that's an automatic 5 years, and that's usually kind of hooks up a lot of people in government. I mean, under the last administration, General David Petraeus was not prosecuted for mishandling classified information, but he pled guilty to lying to the Fed. You know, the whole thing, right?
Sure.
So, and then the other piece is that the investigation goes beyond, trying to keep it simple, the investigation does go beyond Flynn. The U.S. intelligence community is routinely monitoring the conversations of foreign intelligence targets, so that can be people in the Russian intelligence or the Russian government, for example. In the course of doing that, they picked up some contact between members of the Trump campaign team and the Russians. But here's where what we know seems to really differ from what was in, I think it was the New York Times this morning, is that we were not told that these contacts were constant, and we were not told the contacts were with Russian intelligence officials. And we were also told that at this point there was nothing in the conversations that violated any laws. So what we have at the end of the day is a very broad investigation, which was looking at what ultimately became the incoming administration. And your listeners rather, can decide whether this was warranted or there may have been a political element to it.
Catherine, can you comment on the reports that some former top Obama administration officials, including Ben Rhodes and some others, had sort of been behind an effort to get Flynn out because of his opposition to the Iran deal?
Well, I can tell you that I've in the reporting the last couple of days, there are a small group of names that have come up consistently as likely having access to such restricted information, and people who are now out of government and might be in a position to provide this information to the media. So I'm actually going to each one of these individuals, and I'm asking them if they condemn the leaks because of the sensitivity of the information and whether they have any knowledge of how that information got to the media. And so far, some of these individuals have just refused to comment, period, which I find pretty interesting because they used to be in very senior jobs where protecting classified information was a priority. I can't speak to their thinking, but one would hope that they would be forward-leaning in the condemnation of classified information leaks, because people have been prosecuted for so much less. But anyway, that's what I'm doing.
Catherine,
working down my list.
I know your time is limited. We'll look for your report today on the Fox News Channel. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
All right, bye. Had to get her out there by 12:51. She's got to do a television report here in just a few minutes on the Fox News Channel. Isn't that interesting? So there you heard from one of the top investigative reporters in Washington that, first of all, whatever General Flynn discussed with this ambassador was not illegal. There's nothing to suggest that it broke the law, that he's already been interviewed by the FBI, that what they were looking at goes beyond Flynn, because as the New York Times reported, some of the people who were lower in the Trump administration had contact with the Russians people in Russia during the election. Now, there's a big difference between saying that which is what the New York Times did. They would lead you to believe that every Russian is somebody in a top coat with a hood pulled over their head, hiding underneath an overpass to pass off secret information. Or they all work for Vladimir Putin. So the insinuation is that top officials in the Trump campaign were somehow coordinating with the Russians to defeat Hillary Clinton. I heard one report today that went so far as to suggest that the timing is suspect because they played that bite from Trump where he goes, hey, you know what? If you can, you Russians, if you can find those missing 33,000 emails, you ought to release them. That they actually used that soundbite to suggest that Trump was giving some sort of verbal commands to the Russians that his minions were controlling inside of his campaign. That's how ridiculous this has gotten. But you heard Catherine Herridge say nothing in their reporting suggests that these contacts, whatever they were constant, and that none of them involved intelligence officials with the Russians. We know Paul Manafort in the past had done some sort of business in Russia. Why would he not have contacts with people in Russia? Just don't, when you get in a conversation with a liberal at the water cooler today, don't let them get away with these blanket accusations that this must be some proof that Donald Trump conspired with the Russians to defeat Hillary Clinton. Just don't even let them get away with that because it's complete and utter garbage. If it looks like there will be an investigation in Congress where they try to run General Flynn up a pole, they may want to bear in mind what our caller Joe pointed out earlier. Flynn knows where the bodies were buried. He was there during the whole Benghazi mess under the Obama administration. So they may want to be cautious where they go with this when they get him up there with his hand raised under oath in front of a Senate committee. You're not dealing with a wallflower here. And when you hear Donald Trump say this today, I feel more confident than ever that he has confidence in Flynn and fired him simply because of an error in judgment in not telling the vice president about some of the content of that conversation, which there's nothing in that conversation that broke the law, according to Catherine Herridge.
Michael Flynn, General Flynn, is a wonderful man. I think he's been treated very, very unfairly by the media, as I call it, the fake media.
So, again, he's praising Flynn. If in this intelligence briefing to he and Obama back before the inauguration, the intelligence official said, we know that he talked to them about removing the sanctions as soon as you're in office. Don't you think Obama would have done something about that back then? There's nothing to suggest that's what happened here. Nothing to suggest that that's what happened here.